Welcome, everyone. We're so excited that you're here for an Enable webinar. Whether you're a longtime client of ours or this is your first encounter with us, we're so glad you're here. I'm Carolyn. I'm the Content Marketing Specialist at Enable Ministry Partners, and today we'll be focusing on cybersecurity in your church. Leading our webinar today is Travis. Travis Phipps is the Director of Technology at Enable Ministry Partners and has been with us over 13 years. In addition to being Enable's resident cybersecurity expert, he helps manage our team of engineers and technicians and works closely with them to oversee Enable's technology strategy and the direction for our clients. Travis is a preacher's kid who loves serving churches through technology at Enable, doing exactly what God clearly built him to do. He lives in Wiley, Texas with his wife and 2 children. Before I hand it over to Travis, I want to give you a few items before we begin. 1, you can pause and rewind the webinar at any point. Just use the icons in the bottom left of your screen. If you joined anonymously, please put your name in the QA for us so we know who you are. Also, if you have any questions during the presentation, please write them in the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. We will get to as many as we can during the webinar. If we don't get to your questions, we plan to post them all on the recap page along with a recording of the webinar that we'll send out after this. This way you can access it later or pass it along to your coworkers who couldn't attend today. We're excited to learn what you have for us today, Travis, so take it away whenever you're ready.
All right, thanks so much, Carolyn. I appreciate it. And looks like we're already up to 17 attendees, so welcome. And I think we might have a few more folks join us, but we got a lot to cover today, so let's get started. I love folks that show up on time, right? They should get everything. So we are going to talk about cybersecurity, and our focus is going to be around spooky stories. It's the spooky month of Halloween, so we just like that theme. But before we get into some of the stories, we wanted to talk about some basics of cybersecurity, because it's great to understand and kind of scare ourselves with what can happen, but it's better to know what we need to do to protect ourselves to avoid it happening, right? Or how to react when it does. And so here on this slide, we have some standards, what we would call the standards of cybersecurity, things that you probably already have, or at least you've heard about, and you know that you should be doing. So the first one on our list is a firewall with unified threat management. That's a fancy term. It just means this. Your firewall should also be doing things like block objectionable content. So block the types of websites that you don't want folks getting to from your church's internet connection. It might also do gateway level antivirus. So actually scanning the traffic that traverses from the internet or to the internet through your network connection and through your firewall. There are other things it might do as well, but the idea here is you want something that is doing more than just basic, yes, it's allowed or no, it's not, but actual filtering at different levels. And that's what that unified threat management is all about. The next piece would be backups and business continuity. No matter how good your cyber protections are, they will fail you at some point. Something is going to happen. We like to talk in the IT circles, it's not really a matter of if you're going to fall victim, but when. And how big is the impact when you do? That's the mindset that we try to keep ourselves in, because there's no such thing as perfect protection. There's no such thing as stopping all of it. Even if it existed, none of us could afford it. So we have to understand that we need to know how to get back to business, and yes, there's a business aspect to our churches. And so we need to know how to get back into an operational status. And so having good, reliable backups that have been tested and proven to work, and whatever your business continuity plan is. So for some organizations, just basic backups that, it may take us a week or so to restore data is sufficient. For other organizations, you may need a more robust solution because maybe you run payroll in-house, or your financial system or your church management system is inside of your network. And in that case, you need a faster recovery. And so knowing what your needs are and making sure your technical solution around business continuity matches your needs and expectations is really, really important. And then antivirus and anti-malware and anti-spam. We kind of put all those together because those are basically a given these days. Everybody understands that you need these tools in place. And the good news is that it's pretty much a given that you have them these days. Even if you don't buy an antivirus, Windows has one built in for you. Mac sort of has one built in for you, sort of an antivirus. The anti-malware features, again, pretty common and exist in most cases. And then anti-spam. If you're using Google or Microsoft as your email provider, they both are already providing free spam filtering for you. So you've got something. Now, is it good enough? That may be a question to ask, but you've already got something in place. That's really good. And then patching. This is one that IT people think is obvious, but not everybody thinks it's obvious. So let me explain this real quick. We all know that all the devices and software that we use sometimes have bugs. And in the cybersecurity world, we call those vulnerabilities, right? So a bug just means some kind of defect, something that doesn't work correctly. If it has a security implication, now that becomes a potential vulnerability into accessing your data or your systems or things like that. These are all created by humans and therefore they have mistakes in them. So our software vendors and our hardware vendors are always coming out with new updates to fix these bugs and to plug these vulnerabilities. But how good are we at installing those updates? So there's all sorts of stories that I could reference here, but I'll reference the credit bureau, who shall remain nameless, but the credit bureau who had their entire system compromised because they had failed to install a patch from their software vendors. So making sure that those patches are getting installed is really, really important. And just assuming that it's happening is not really good enough. You need to have a way to report on it and prove it. By the way, your insurance carriers are asking you to provide that evidence to them as a part of providing you coverage. And don't forget about all the other things on your network that you probably don't think about, like your HVAC system or your security cameras or the Alexa device sitting on your desk, right? All of these devices that connect to your network are potential endpoints to be what's called a foothold in your environment. So all it takes is for a hacker to compromise one device, and now they own or they have control of something inside your network. Once they have access inside your network, it's far easier to compromise other things in your network. So you have to think about all the devices and are you patching them and keeping them up to date? Because there are always bugs being found. The next piece is limiting and or making sure that whatever remote access you provide is secure. So again, think about your security cameras or your HVAC system. Does somebody on staff use their cell phone from home to program and control those things? When they do that, are they using an encrypted connection to the device on site? I'll give you a hint. Most of those platforms don't make it easy or the default to be a secure encrypted connection. So that's something to consider. And obviously, you've heard about VPN or you've heard about remote desktop. These are solutions that can provide remote access. If you are still using remote desktop, highly, highly, highly recommend you look for alternative solutions. There are lots of known ways to compromise the traditional remote desktop capability of Windows. You can secure it, but you really need to know what you're doing to make that happen. And then on VPN, I'll be honest, like, do you need it anymore? If you've moved to a cloud-first approach, if your church management system is in the cloud, if your files and your email are in the cloud, like, what are people using your VPN to access anyway? Or what would it take to get rid of it altogether? If you can remove these possible points of entry, you are protecting your environment more. And then insurance, right? Because I mentioned it's not if, but when. And so when you get compromised or when you have something happen, how are you protecting yourself? What are you going to do about it? It's going to cost money to fix it. And so this is where having a good cybersecurity insurance policy comes in handy, right? You want to make sure that you have the ability to recover and that somebody's going to help you pay for it. That's what these policies are for. And I highly recommend, if you don't have a discrete policy for this today, you should talk to your insurance vendor about that. Most cybersecurity policies that are just a rider on your general liability insurance have limitations to what they cover. But a discrete cybersecurity policy will most likely cover more or cover a larger amount, and you should talk to your insurance professional about what's appropriate for your organization. All right, so those are some basic standards that we probably all have in some form or fashion. Now let's talk about some more things that are maybe not as obvious, but they really are just as important. Strong, unique passwords for each system. Okay, yes, we all have passwords. I get it. But how many of us use a different password for each thing that we log into? I will just tell you the number one problem that we see our clients face is that when they are compromised, when someone successfully breaches, say, their email account, then when we dialogue with that user, we find out, oh yeah, that password is the same one I use for my bank and for Facebook and for Yahoo and for Google and. Now that attacker has access to all of those accounts. They breached one, but now they have access to everything. So we are strong proponents for do not use the same password. Make sure every password you use is strong, and use a password manager, an application that is purpose-built to help you create really long and strong passwords, unique for every system you log into. So look those up. Feel free to hit our website. We'll talk in a minute. We'll talk later on and give you some resources to look at around that. Multi-factor authentication. This is one that I think by now everybody's heard of. Everybody is like, man, that's a pain. I know, I get it. I wish we didn't have to do it, but it is one of the best protections we have right now to help protect your identity, which is your key to getting into the various things like your email system, your church management system, your bank, et cetera, et cetera. So multi-factor authentication, thank the hackers. They're the reason we have to have it, but you need to be using it. And then here's one that's not always so obvious, but you really need a good inventory. You need to know what computers you own. You need to know everything that connects to your network. And you need to know all the people that have accounts within your church systems, whether they're volunteers, current staff, former staff. And the reason this inventory thing is important is that you can't protect what you don't know you're responsible for. So if you don't know all the computers that you have, how do you know if they're patched? If you don't know every HVAC system and security camera that's plugged into your network, how on earth are you ever going to know if you're protected? And then on the user front, if you're just allowing former employee accounts to pile up, every one of those is a potential endpoint into your environment and into your data and into your systems. And again, stories that we could tell about systems, but look up the Colonial Pipeline. The Colonial Pipeline attack happened because they failed to delete a former employee's account. So make sure that you have a good inventory and keep it current. And then the last piece here is network segmentation. Some folks refer to this as a zero trust architecture, if you've ever heard that. It simply means this. Just because something plugs into your internal network doesn't mean you should inherently trust that device and everything that it does. So to that end, remember earlier I mentioned all they need is access to one device, and from that one device, they can access everything else in your network. Well, one great way to protect against that is to segment your network. Typically, you'll hear IT people use a term like VLANs to talk about this. That's a common terminology. That's a common technology used to help do this segmentation. But the idea of segmentation is very simple. You should have one part of your network for the devices that your staff use that are owned by the church. So their laptops and their desktops. That should be one segment of your network. You should have another segment of your network that's just for like building automation things. So HVAC systems or lighting control systems, put them together and don't let those devices talk to the staff workstation devices. Put a firewall between them so they can't talk to each other. Segment each one of these things. Now, if one of those device types becomes compromised, your blast radius, there's a technical term for you, the blast radius is lessened. Because if someone is, let's say, has access and control of your HVAC system, well, then they can only access and potentially infect other HVAC or lighting systems. They can't get to your work laptops where the confidential data is stored, right? So segmenting the network provides the ability for you to limit the blast radius if when you have an attack. Okay, so the last piece, and arguably the most important piece, is your people. Your people are actually your biggest vulnerability. So you, as a user of technology, you are my worst nightmare because you are the one that has access to all this stuff. And firewalls are good at not falling victim to somebody trying to trick them into something. But are you? What about the rest of your staff? So how do you overcome this problem? You do a whole lot of training. You talk about it incessantly. You send them to webinars like this, where you scare them into compliance. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe. But training is what it's all about. So you have to teach your staff about the threats that they are vulnerable to. You have to teach your staff about the data that they have access to and how it should be appropriately used and not used, right? So should they be taking data out of your church management system or your payroll system and putting it in spreadsheets that they email to other people? I would say that's a risky behavior. But how many of your staff naturally recognize or think that way? Probably very few of them. So you have to train them. And there's lots of ways to do that. You can do it with webinars like this. You can do it with live teaching. Invite someone from Enable or someone that you know and trust to come teach a lunch and learn to your staff and explain this to them. That's a great way. Did you know church people are used to watching somebody stand in front and speak to them? Imagine that. It's almost like on a weekly basis, they're used to that, right? So they learn really well that way. Send emails. Just send an email out. Hey, here's some stuff we've heard about. These are some things to watch out for. Be careful about this, right? So emails, videos, live training, webinars, use every mechanism you can because everybody learns differently. And sometimes it's the 12th time they've heard it before that finally clicks for them. But train, and don't stop. And then there are some tools that can help. So I've called out Iron Scales here. That's an anti-phishing tool. So it doesn't really focus on spam. It focuses on the messages that are trying to trick you into doing something or giving away information. And Iron Scales is an amazing tool that can help identify those, stop those, give warning signs to your staff, and actually help their awareness of cybersecurity grow simply by having that tool in place. Again, training. Notice the theme? Testing, question mark? The reason I put that there is there are tools that will let you send fake phishing messages to your staff to see who falls for it. Now that can be a double-edged sword, right? Because your people won't feel good about failing a test, right? And especially if you don't tell them about it, here's a hint. It's more effective if you don't warn them that it's coming. But if you don't tell them about it, then do they feel like you tricked them? Some do, some don't, right? Culturally, you have to figure out what's right for you. But there are tools that you can use to send those and use that as a raising awareness, because if they fail, then maybe they have to watch a training video or something like that. Oh yeah, that gets us back to train them. Talk about this often. I always tell our staff that we are not talking about this enough until people are rolling their eyes every time we say it. When they start rolling their eyes, that's an indication that, oh, I've heard this before. Good. And then keep talking about it because there's always new threats. And at this point, I just wonder if there's any questions that anybody has posed so far. And if not, I want to remind you, we have a Q&A panel. Throw your comments, throw your questions in there. And as we roll into spooky stories, maybe you have your own spooky story to add. So Carolyn, do we have any questions so far?
We are good. We are very quiet on this side, but guys, don't be shy. Travis is here to answer your questions. Please pop that in our Q&A.
Awesome. Well, then I will keep going, and I hope to spark questions as we go. All right, so now we're getting into the spookiness. Let's look at some real world examples, and I want to really emphasize that. These are real emails and real stories that happened to real churches. So I don't know who all's on the call today. You may be from one of the churches that had this happen. I apologize, but thank you for allowing us to share your story if that's the case. But please know that these are not made up. And so these example emails that we're going to look at on the next couple of screens, these are real emails that our clients have received and that we pulled out as examples. And here's what I want you to focus in on. I'll look at these in depth, but here's what I want you to see. These are not generic businessy kind of emails. These are worded and targeted specifically at churches. In other words, the attackers have figured out that we are soft targets. And they know that we have a lot of data on people. We have money and resource. And that's what they're after. So let's look at this first one here. It says, grace and peace. My name is Erica. I'm 26 years old. I'm new to town. I'd like to know how I can get more involved with the church. Does the blah, 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 blah have a meeting, youth and adult groups that I can participate in? Well, this sounds very innocuous, right? Like I would get this and go, oh, this is awesome. We've reached somebody new. They're new in the community. They want to get plugged in. They want to get connected, right? I mean, we'd all look at this and go, well, this looks legit. Here's the problem. When you engage with this person, and this really happened, you engage with this person and then all of a sudden the ask comes, right? So once they've hooked you, they now know you're a real person and they are now striking up a conversation with you. And their job is to lower your defenses. You may not have had any defenses in the first place because we're here to love people and serve people. And this is exactly why we exist as a church, as an organization, right? The problem is that the reach out then starts to get into, oh, I'm down on my luck. Here's the problem I'm having. I haven't found a new job in this new town. Can you help me out? Is there money? Is there this? Is there that? So you have to just be suspicious. I know that goes against every fiber of our being in ministerial spaces, but we have to be a little more suspicious. So what do you do about something like this, right? You look for things that either it's a pattern that you've seen commonly, right? And the reason we know this was a fish because this message went to a whole lot of churches in a whole lot of places throughout the United States. And we did have folks that did respond and started to get hooked, right? So that's how we know this was a fish message. But how do you look out for that? Well, you just have to be suspicious. And here's my advice. My advice is this. Anytime somebody comes asking for something that you already publish on your public website or on social media, redirect them to the place where you've already provided that information. Or if they're asking if there's a, for you to call them or something, redirect them to your public church phone number. Because I'll tell you right now, your receptionists are really good at sniffing this stuff out. Your receptionists get a lot of calls from a lot of strange folks, right? Asking weird questions, and they're really good at figuring out real quick what's real and what's not. And they're already used to and have processes in place to handle those kind of requests. So my suggestion when you get these reach outs is send them to publicly available information and publicly available phone numbers. Try to avoid connecting personally on the initial intake. So there's one. I know that's hard, but we're about cybersecurity on this conversation. The next
Travis,
one is, hey, look, oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. We have two questions, and before we go any further, I just want to see if I can pop these over to you.
Cool.
Kurt is asking, does Windows Professional have a practical MFA option or solution?
Windows Professional. So Windows Professional would be the operating system on a workstation. And so if the question is there a practical MFA for signing into a local device? My advice is Windows Hello. So if you are leveraging Microsoft 365, then you have the Windows Hello platform, which is Microsoft's branding around biometrics. So if your devices have a camera that can do facial recognition, or they have a fingerprint reader, then those are biometrics. And so the idea there is that is actually your second factor, right? So it feels weird because it bypasses your password, but really what you're doing is you're proving who you are as a human being. So that is the second factor. So that would be what's built into the operating system or available officially from Microsoft. If you want like a true MFA, like it pops up a code, you got to type in the code, that's going to require a third party. And honestly, it's uncommon to see these days outside of government circles, but it is available.
Great. I have one more question. I have someone asking that they are using in-house conference software and their device were fabricated in China. Therefore, Enable is skeptical of using of those devices being a security weakness. What is your opinion of Biomap conference hardware?
That is not a name I'm familiar with. So that obviously immediately raises my awareness a little bit and makes me question it. I'll just be blunt. If it's not from a known vendor that is in the Microsoft ecosystem, I'm assuming conference hardware, I'm assuming Microsoft, it might be somebody else. But Microsoft, Google, Zoom, they all do their own, we'll call them hardware certifications. If it's from a vendor that they have vetted and approved and said, okay, they're one of our approved and certified vendors, we'll feel more secure about that. But if it's not, then we're definitely going to be a little more wary. But here's what I would offer. That's a great opportunity for network segmentation. Those devices, if all they're doing is providing you a video conferencing capability, maybe they can just live on your guest network where we would implement client isolation. So every device that's on your guest network can't talk to other devices. So it's like the ultimate segmentation. So that would be my advice for something like that.
I just have a little clarification. I may have misspoken. Our question is BIAMP. Is it BIAMP? I may have misspoken.
I would pronounce it BIAMP. Yeah.
Okay, my apologies,
I would say if we're
Travis.
getting into specifics, like that would be a great conversation to have with your client team. So if you're an Enable client, then you would know your strategy consultant, maybe your engineering team. I would talk specifically with them to get into the specifics for sure. All right. So let's keep moving here. Let's look at this next phishing message. It says, hey, look, I'm new to the area. I'm looking at moving, new beginning, new church, right? It's kind of that same story, right? New to the area. Here, let me tell you a little bit about myself. And here's all the things that I'm into. And I love this one. On a more personal note, I've had several jobs over my lifetime, but most recently I've worked on several campaigns for the Republican candidates. Well, clearly they're trying to hit some key phrases and some certain demographic information that they think is going to resonate well, maybe with someone on a church staff. Again, this is one that we saw across multiple clients kind of simultaneously. The name was always slightly different. So it wasn't always Guadalupe Hernandez, which was interesting to us, but it was always a particular political category that they made sure to call out. Again, there's just things in here that if you look at it and you read it, you can tell that they are trying to tug on your heartstrings a bit, right? And so those are the things to watch out for. So let's look at this next page for a couple more examples. This one starts out, it says it's from Elder J. Anderson. We see this very commonly from elders or from the lead or senior pastor. That tends to be the most common, but it just says, hey, look, I need a moment of your time. I got a request. I need you to handle it discreetly. Oh, but by the way, right now I'm in a prayer session, so you really can't call me. So hey, if you could just email me back or just text me back, right? Like don't bother me because I'm in prayer, right? Okay, clearly this is fishy. If you haven't seen one of these, I would be shocked at this point. This one is very, very common via text and via email. We're seeing a ton of this. So make your staff aware of this. The number one thing to know is don't engage in a way that's atypical. So if this is not how you would normally communicate with this person, there's a red flag, right? But also anytime they say, I need you to do something, but I'm too busy to talk to you about it, that's a red flag, right? And certainly when they start asking for gift cards and other things that involve money, that's a red flag. So our best advice for that is call them on the phone, a number that you already know. Don't let them email you their phone number, because if it's an attacker, they're just going to send you a fake phone number, right? So make sure that you call them on a number you already know and talk to them, or better yet, look them in the eye face to face and speak with them about this to make sure that it's legit. In this day and age, every pastor I've talked to is somewhat aware of this and understands why people are questioning a little more when they get asked for something or asked to do something. And when it comes to protection of the church's finances or a member's finances, they're very understanding. Let's see, the last one is, I'm a widow. My husband had a passion for music, but he never went professional. I got a piano. I got a piano just sitting in storage. I would like to donate it to the church. Well, that sounds very altruistic. Here's the problem. This email, same email, got sent to churches all over the country. We saw it all at once. We had other churches that we happened to know and partner with through the church IT network that were all going, hey, has anybody gotten one like this? We all had. So immediately we went, okay, this is not real. This is not legit. But we did go ahead and engage on one just to see, because we were like, what's the hook here? Like, what are we going to fall? Here it was. You engage, and all of a sudden you find out, oh, I don't have a way to transport the piano, so you need to come pick it up. And, well, yeah, it's in that storage locker, but, well, I'm actually behind on the rent. So, like, if you could send me $500, then I can get it paid up, and then they'll unlock it, and then we can go pick up the piano. So that was the trick here, was trying to gain trust to earn money to then offer this generous gift. So, again, seems innocuous, but it wasn't. So now we're more suspicious, right? All right. So now let's get into some spooky stories. So the stories that I'm about to tell, again, are real. They happened to real churches just like you. And some of them are our clients. In fact, I think all the stories that I'm telling today are Enable clients. But trust me when I tell you that it's not just Enable clients that unfortunately have fallen victim to some of these things. So the story of the compromised landscaper goes something like this. A church has a landscaping company that does their landscaping for them, right? They handle the yard mowing and the trimming of the hedges, that kind of thing. And they have used the same company for years. And the process is, hey, the landscaping company comes out on Tuesday and does the work. And then, they turn in their invoice before they leave. And by the time they come back next week, then they've got the check ready. And so they kind of trade, here's a check for last week, and here's the invoice for that week, right? So this is pretty standard. You see this all the time. And so in this case, all of a sudden one day, the church finance administrator received an email from the landscaping company. It said, hey, we are modernizing our business. We are moving to electronic payments. And so instead of prepping that check for us, if you wouldn't mind, just go ahead and wire that money to us. Here's the account information. So the church finance person thought, oh, that's great. I love less paperwork in my life. And so they dutifully pulled up the invoice, wired the payment. So then Tuesday rolls around, the landscaper shows up. He's like, hey, I wanted to pick up that check. And they go, we already wired it to you. At which point they realize, that email did not come from the landscaping company. Or actually, in this case, it did. Because what had happened in this case was not that somebody pretended with a different email address to be the landscaping company, but the landscaping company themselves actually had been compromised. So their finance person had their email account compromised, and the attacker had studied the messages in their mailbox and figured out who their clients were and sent the messages from the finance person's mailbox to the clients, asking them to wire money to the attacker's bank account. And the finance person at the landscaper had no idea this was going on. So in this case, the landscaping company was actually compromised, but it caused a loss for the church because the church wired money to an account. They're never going to get that money back. So because of a compromised vendor, the church had a financial loss. So what do we learn from this? What do we do about something like this? So here's our lessons learned. So first, verify financial transactions face-to-face or verbally via a previous known contact number. So this is like the example from phishing that I talked about earlier. So if the church finance person, when receiving that email, had gone into her Rolodex and said, okay, well, here's the phone number. Let me call them. Hey, I got this email from you. I just want to make sure before I make this change and wire money that this is legitimate and this is correct. Can we validate all this is good? If that had happened, they would have figured out at that moment that it wasn't a legitimate request, right? So all financial changes or transactions need to be validated via known good information. Don't email back and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this. Can you just send me a phone number? Because they'll send you the attacker phone number, right? The next thing is just have a two-person system. Like if you're changing a financial transaction process, if you're changing where you wire money or how you wire money or how you send money, make two people look at it and sign off on it. Because while it may not raise suspicion for one of you, hopefully it will for the other, right? So by having two people look at it, you improve your chances of being more suspicious and catching weird things. And then here's the other piece. You need to press on your vendors to make sure they're doing things on their end to improve their cybersecurity posture. Because you can be a victim for no real fault of your own, simply because they were attacked or hacked or compromised. So you want to press on them. And you want to, what is it? A rising tide raises all ships. So if you're the one that's speaking out to your vendors, right, and saying, hey, look, we're working on improving our cybersecurity posture, and we're asking all of our vendors to do the same. Can you tell me, Mr. Vendor, do you require MFA for all of your staff? How do you verify financial transactions, right? Things like that. What are you doing? Ask your vendors if they're doing it too, and impress upon them the importance that they do. Carolyn, I think we had a question.
Yes, we do. Travis, wouldn't the landscaping company have access to the sent email? Could that have been reviewed occasionally to catch something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of ways that this could have been figured out or learned about, I guess. But most people are not poking around in their email looking for anomalies. They're just doing the day-to-day work that they normally would do. I will say that N-able actually recently partnered with a cybersecurity organization that we already work with, but they have a new product available that they're calling it Managed Detection and Response, specifically for Microsoft 365. And the idea is that tool set, this company is actually going to automatically ingest all of the logs of the activity in your 365 environment, and they're going to look for patterns that look suspicious or that match known patterns of attacker behavior. So they're going to try to help identify these compromised accounts based on the activity that they see flowing through 365. And then they actually have a team of humans in their Security Operations Center, or SOC, that will take the automated alerts and then really analyze it and confirm from a human perspective that, yes, this really does look weird and suspicious. And then they can actually take action to lock your account or to at least notify you or N-able about that. So we're really excited about that feature, about that tool. It does have a cost, and unfortunately, it's one of those things where we're playing this game of, okay, we have to spend a little more to improve our security, and that is true. We just do. We have to understand that in order to stay secure, we're having to invest more financial resource today to do that. But if you're interested in that tool, let us know. Reach out to your N-able client relationship team or info@n-able.email. We'd be happy to talk to you about that tool. It's awesome. The company behind it is amazing. We're really proud to partner with them. So we'd love to share more about that. All right. So now Oh yeah,
Travis?
here's this final note, this footnote here.
Travis, excuse me. I got one follow-up from Dan.
Okay.
I would presume from your discussion that we should not use Apple Mail. It would appear we should do all email from within Microsoft Outlook 365. Is that your recommendation?
So if you are using Microsoft 365, then you will get the best experience and the most secure experience using Outlook, whether that's on a Mac or on Windows or on your mobile device, Android, iPhone. Outlook is the preferred option. You'll get the best support, you'll get the most security. Apple Mail works fine. It will do things, right? But it won't do everything that Outlook can do in a 365 environment. So that is our recommendation. All right. So this footnote here is just that this attack, while we focused on a landscaping company, I just want you to know we have seen this actual attack take place with construction companies where churches lost millions of dollars from a building fund. We've also seen it with a mission trip planning company. So the planning company was compromised and funds were wired to an attacker account instead of the mission trip planning company account. And so in that case, they lost tens of thousands. So it's not just landscaping vendors. It's not even just generic businesses. It's church-focused entities like a mission trip planning company that are also victim of this. So be careful, be suspicious. All right. The next spooky story to tell is the story of the sinister signatory. So the sinister signatory starts with a church that has done everything that N-able has recommended they do to improve their cybersecurity posture. And specifically, they have implemented multi-factor authentication. They have done things to limit access to things. They have done network segmentation. They have done a lot of the things we've talked about. And unfortunately, they still fell victim, and here's how. So in this case, the business administrator for the church received an email that asked them to go log into their 365 account. And unfortunately, they weren't actually logging into their 365 account. They were logging into the attacker's website. But that means that the attacker was able to capture their email address and their password. And then what the attacker started doing was trying to log in to 365 using this username and password that they just captured. And of course, multi-factor authentication got in the way. So what did the attacker do? Well, they just kept doing it. And so what happened was the end user was receiving a lot of prompts over and over again. And finally, they were like, oh, this is driving me nuts. Approve. So that's called MFA fatigue. They're wearing you out, getting you to just push the button so it stops. Well, unfortunately, that meant that now the attacker had access to the account. So MFA fail, right? Because the person clicked to approve MFA even though they weren't actively trying to log into anything. The attacker was. So at this point, this is, this happened, right, at a point in time. Nobody knew. And for the next 4 weeks, nobody knew that the attacker had access to this person's account. So they had access to their email, they had access to their OneDrive, had access to their SharePoint and Teams websites, had access to everything in 365 because they had compromised the identity of this business administrator. And so from there, about 4 weeks later, the attacker, after setting up some special rules in their mailbox so that, you know, if somebody emailed this person with a certain set of words, it would just move it out of the way into another folder. So the business administrator would never see it. But the attacker just watched that special folder. And so what they proceeded to do was to reach out to the bank because they had combed through all the emails. They knew who the banker was. They knew who the bank was. They knew the account information. It was all in the email history. And so they pretended to be the business administrator and said to the banker, hey, I need to add somebody else to our bank account because we need to move some money around. And the banker was like, hey, no problem. Just have them stop by the branch. We just need them to sign the paper. You're thinking, okay, well, that'll probably be the end of that. Surely the attacker wouldn't be brazen enough to walk into the bank and actually sign paperwork. They were. So there is actual video from the bank surveillance system of the attacker who proceeded to show up at the bank and sign the paperwork. And the banker presented the paperwork, they signed the paper, they immediately added the attacker with online access to the bank account. So compromised email, now compromised bank account. So now over the next 2 weeks, the attacker transferred small sums of money, enough to kind of not catch anybody's attention. Over the course of about 2 weeks, it added up to multiple six figures of money. And at some point, there were some emails that went between the banker. I think the banker questioned something, and so then the business administrator saw it and they started talking and they figured out, hey, wait a minute, there's something fishy going on here. So they locked down access, they got it figured out, we sorted things out. But at that point, they had lost money. Now, in this case, this church, again, had followed our advice and they had a good cybersecurity insurance policy. So the first thing we did was we got on the phone with the insurance carrier. We said, hey, we have confirmed a breach. Not only do we suspect it, but we have confirmed a breach, and we have cut off access. Like, we've just turned off everything for now. Because here's something you need to know. The number one thing you should do when you suspect a breach, immediately terminate access. Block sign-in to anything that you think might be compromised. And then call your insurance company. They need to be your first, well, if you're an Enable client, call us first, we'll help you call them. So maybe they're your second phone call, right? But don't try to recover or resolve the problem on your own. Because if you do, your insurance policy might not pay out. So we got on the phone with the insurance company. They said, okay, we're going to get our incident team on this. In the meantime, can you please confirm for us that you have MFA enabled, that you have antivirus running, that you have this, that you have that? And they had a checklist. And we helped go down the list and we said, yes, 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 yes. Here's the reports. And the insurance company said, okay, everything you told us when we issued the policy, you've just proven to us you did, so we will cover this event. It was that easy because we were on top of it, right? The client was on top of it. They had done the things necessary. And at that point, the incident response team and the legal advisors came in from the insurance company and helped sort everything out and rectify it and recuperate and, make them whole. So that was great. But really, really scary story. And yes, the FBI is involved. Yes, they have the video evidence. All the things that you would expect needed to happen have happened. But scary, scary, scary situation. Real, and it really happened. So what did we learn? Number one, even with MFA, you can be compromised. So don't think that because you have MFA, you're just automatically protected. Nope, you're still at risk. You still need to be educated. Here's another one. The bank fell for it. Like, you would think that banks are spending a whole lot more money training their people and implementing protections and safeguards and processes and stuff to stop this kind of stuff. And yeah, they do. But even the bank fell for it. So we're all in this thing together. So just like your vendors have an impact on you, well, guess what? Your bank, you can have an impact on them and vice versa, right? So we are all trying to fight this fight together, and we're not going to get it perfect every time. And then here's one, restricting the ability to forward emails to outside addresses. So some of your church staff may go, I really just don't like Microsoft. I'm just going to keep using my Gmail account for everything. So I'm just going to forward all my emails from work to Gmail, and that's how I'm going to work. Well, here's the problem with that. What platform do you think attackers are using? Whether it's Gmail or Yahoo or whatever other platform they decide to use, the ability to just have your work emails automatically forward to an outside organization, that's a risk. And you can stop that. And if you do put a stop to it, well, guess what? Now you're helping to protect yourself a little bit more, because the attacker doesn't want to stay signed into your little account all the time. They want it all forwarding to them. And so when we see those forwards, that's a telltale sign of a potentially compromised account. But if we stop that, we're limiting one mechanism that they use commonly. And then if something just feels weird, that's when you need to ask for help. Like, I thought I saw an email, but then it was gone. Somebody just messaged me about something. It doesn't make sense to me. Hey, I emailed somebody and they told me they never saw it. All of those are weird things. And when those weird things happen, you need to reach out to your IT professionals to help you look at it, right? So when something feels off, odds are something's wrong. Where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And then never store passwords and credit card info in your notes or in your Excel files. That's confidential information. Use a password manager that's designed to keep that encrypted and protected. Unfortunately, in the case of the sinister signatory, the church needed to update some credit card information because they had some credit card information stored in an Excel file in a OneDrive. Well, remember, the attacker had access to all of that. So everything that the attacker could have potentially accessed had to be updated and changed. So secure it. Don't just store it in Excel files. All right. And then let's get to the last one here. The last spooky story is the story of the fake or rogue volunteer. Now, in this case, it was a fake volunteer, but it could also be a rogue volunteer. Not everybody that serves within our community always stays happy and above board. And so we have to be cautious of this. So here's the story of the fake volunteer. One day, the church front office received an email to their generic kind of info@mychurch.com email address. And it just said, hey, this is Susie so-and-so, and I have a new email address. Will you please update that for me in the church management system? That sounds innocuous enough. Now, the email came from, Susie so-and-so at yahoo.com. Well, the church staff member had no idea. I mean, it sounded legitimate. She changed her email address, looked into church management system, sees a different email address, and is like, yeah, okay, well, update. Hey, Susie, great to hear from you. I've updated that for you. So what happened next? Well, since the inbound email was not really Susie so-and-so, now the attacker had access to the church management system. How is that? Well, this church uses a church management system that lets their members and volunteers log in to manage classes and update attendance and contact other church members. And in this case, this person, Susie so-and-so, happened to be a trusted volunteer who had access to a lot of things. In fact, she had access to way more than she needed to do the volunteer role that she actually had at the church. So what happened next was that the attacker went to the church management site, used their newly input email address, and clicked forgot password. Well, the church management system sent the password reset to the attacker email address. They reset the password, they logged in. Now they had access to the contact information for everybody in the church, including cell phone numbers. And all of a sudden, lots of people in the church started getting text messages from the senior pastor asking for gift cards. And of course, a lot of people started calling into the church going, hey, just got this text from Pastor so-and-so. He wants me to send him gift cards, or, hey, I sent him those gift cards. I wanted to make sure he got them. Right? So unfortunately, because they had not validated Susie so-and-so's request to update her email address, right, they had given access to the attacker, who had harvested all this useful information from the church management system. Also, unfortunately, they didn't have good rules limiting access to the data in the church management system. Susie so-and-so should have only known the contact information for the 10 people in her Sunday school class. But unfortunately, the way their church management system was set up was she was volunteer, so she could contact everybody. That's a big risk, right? So what did we learn from this? Well, limit access. So we call this least privileged access. In other words, don't give people access to more than what they need to do the job or the role or the function that you've asked them to do. Yeah, even an email address, a simple change of an email address can be a way to compromise very confidential information. And then generic requests for updating that info need to be validated via known contact methods, right? So when you get that email, You should go to the church management system, look at the phone number that you know for Susie, and call her. Say, hey, Susie, got this. Just wanted to make sure this is legitimate before I make this change. Had they done that, Susie would have said, no, that's not me. It would have been stopped, right? And then here's another one. It would be nice if church management systems all had multi-factor authentication on them. And unfortunately, not all of them do. So if you don't have multi-factor authentication on your church management system, get it turned on if it's available. And if it's not available, go beat up your vendors until they make it an option. It is inexcusable for a church management system that knows all of this data about all of your congregation to not have a way to do multi-factor authentication. All right. So we're getting near the end of our time. I wanted to see, what questions do you guys have? Or what stories do you have to tell me? I told our staff while you guys are typing, I told my staff earlier this week, I said, hey, I need you to scare me so I can go scare our clients and prospects, right? I knew that we were presenting this today and I wanted to have spooky stories to tell. So maybe you have a spooky story to tell me and I can help educate other churches to help protect them. Right, I don't see anything coming in. So let me flip here. Now let's offer some resources. So we have a cybersecurity checklist that I would highly recommend you grab and take a look at. It will give you 14 checkboxes to look over and see if you can check all 14 or 7 or just 1. The more you check, my guarantee to you is the more checkboxes you check, the lower your insurance premium and the better protected you are as an organization. So check out the checklist. We also have, in addition to the checklist, we have a lot of other tips and tricks and cybersecurity things on our website, enableministry.com, and you can see the cybersecurity tips and tricks. I will tell you, instead of typing all that in, enableministry.com, scroll to the right, resources, and you'll see the link for cybersecurity tips and tricks. And of course, that's also where you would find our blog, where we are constantly posting things about church technology that we hope will be helpful to you. And let's see, I think I have one more slide. What's my last slide? Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming. Carolyn, do you have anything to wrap us up today?
Yes, but just before we go, we do have one small, quick, spooky story. Dan mentioned that he had a lady that he was helping saved all of her passwords in a text file on her desktop. Can you guess what happens?
Yep.
So good spooky story, Dan. Thank you for sharing. Guys, thank you all so much for joining us today. We had such pleasure. As a reminder, we will be posting this recording of the webinar and we'll send it out to you so you can access it. And please pass this along to your coworkers and those that need to know this information. Please visit our website so you can download these resources. They're free to you and we want you all to have these resources. So thank you again, and we will talk to you soon.